Hello and welcome to this ADRN online webinar on the system of political finance in Asian democracies. My name is Aasiya Riaz. I am from Pakistan and I work with Pakistan Institute of Legislative Development and Transparency on behalf of ADRN and East Asia Institute. It is my pleasure to welcome you all in this very important conversation on the role of money or the system of political finance that we have across Asian democracies that we are discussing today. The term of political finance is used to describe all funds that are raised and spent for political purposes. They're not just what candidates spend in electoral campaigns, but it's also funds that political parties spend in running electoral campaigns. These are funds that political parties have in their annual budgets. This is money which they raise for different purposes to run political activity, which is why there's a sort of a larger term than just the campaign finance. What we're trying to do today is trying to understand what kind of a system of political finance is necessary to use to make sure that there's level playing field for citizens in every democracy, that there is money available, which is transparent, which is effectively regulated, and that does not result in any kind of influencing or sabotaging public agenda and democratic governance. I'm joined today by experts from Pakistan, Mr. Ahmed Bilal Mehboob, who's the president of PILDAT, from Indonesia, Shri Nurynati. She's joined us from, she's a researcher at Center for Political Studies at Indonesian Institute of Sciences, Jakarta. Mr. Chin and Wu, he's Associate Research Fellow at Institute of Political Science in Taiwan. And Ms. Aira Azhari, who's managing Democracy and Governance Unit Ideas in Malaysia. Together with these panelists, we'll try and understand what is the system of political finance in each one of these countries? How does it differ from, between country to country? How effective is it? And what kind of reforms are actually needed in the system of political finance in each of these countries that we're discussing? What we would like to focus on through this particular webinar is that we talk about not just the legal framework, which is regulating political finance or role of money in politics and how effectively it's implemented, but what kind of oversight mechanism exists, whether there's compliance, whether there's transparency, and if there are any required reforms in each country that these panelists and these experts believe should be carried out. With this, I would like to request our first presenter, the panelist from Pakistan, Mr. Ahmed Bilal Mehboob, who's been working in this area, who's president of PILDAT. He's the one who created the organization, which has been working in the area of democracy and improving democratic governance in Pakistan for nearly 2 decades. Over to you, Ahmed Bilal Mehboob Saab. What is the system of political finance in Pakistan?
Thank you very much, Aasiya. And thank you very much, East Asia Institute and ADRN for organizing a discussion on a subject which is so important to all democracies, but especially Asian democracies, some of whom are struggling to improve their democratic system. As you very rightly said, political finance is a very important element in keeping the democratic systems safe from vested interests, especially the decision-making in democracy, safe from big money and vested interests. So therefore, I look forward to sharing some thoughts, some features of political finance system in Pakistan and learning from my co-panelists from other countries. And hopefully this will help us in improving our respective political finance systems. In Pakistan, political finance system is basically enshrined in our constitution. and in more detail in our Elections Act, which was passed in 2017 in its present form. So these are the two legal documents which describe the political finance system of Pakistan. Election Commission of Pakistan is the focal institution which has the responsibility and which has basically the powers to monitor the political finance in the country and to take actions wherever there is a violation of the electoral laws or the political finance laws in the country. So basically it's the Election Commission, and Election Commission is an independent institution. It's a 5-membered body, and all 5 members are appointed for a 5-year term. It is appointed by a bipartisan process. The Prime Minister and leader of the opposition in the National Assembly, they have to agree on appointment of the Election Commission, and this particular feature has further enhanced the independence of Election Commission. Our political finance system, basically, if I look at it, it's a 3-pronged political finance system. First entity on which political finance is focused, and focused in a big way, is the candidates for the national and provincial legislatures, and also of the local government officials. Those elected officials, all of them, they are the focus of political finance system. And probably the most elaborate provisions of the political finance system are related to the candidates. Each candidate has to submit its statement of assets and liabilities for the past 1 year to the Election Commission at the time of submitting its nomination papers. So that is the first financial statements which it is making public through the Election Commission. And then along with this statement, it has to submit a very elaborate affidavit. It's a 23-point affidavit, but all of them do not relate to the political finance, but those elements which relate to political finance, which each candidate has to declare. For example, they have to declare what is the tax which they have paid over the past 3 years. So they have to give details of all the taxes, whether it is income tax or it is agriculture income tax or whatever tax, what has been submitted, it has to give details for the past 3 years. It has to also give details of the outstanding loans, if any, which it has to pay to financial institutions. It has also to declare if it has defaulted on any government dues or utility bills. It has to also declare that if it has any businesses, if it owns any businesses, any companies, it must give details, a list of those companies. And it also must give the details of its foreign travel in the past 3 years. So this detail is probably needed, that how much money that person has been spending. So it's a very elaborate affidavit, which provides a lot of information about the financial dealings or financial standing of the candidate. And one more thing, they have to also declare that how much money, if that candidate has paid to the political party as a donation or anything else, and how much money if he has ever received from that political party of which he is a candidate. So these are the elaborate information which a candidate has to declare. Then there's a spending limit for each candidate. For example, a candidate for the National Assembly, which is the our popularly elected House of Parliament. Now recently we have enhanced the spending limit to 4 million Pakistani rupees, which roughly converts into 26,000 US dollars. So this is the spending limit. They cannot spend more than that. And for the Provincial Assembly, half of it, which is the 13,000 US dollars. So that is spending limit. And this spending includes all the money which whether the candidate himself spends, herself spends, or some supporters or political party or anyone spends. But lately this spending limit law has been somewhat diluted. If somebody spends money uh, uh, to favor the candidate without his permission, her permission, then that money will not be counted towards the spending limit. It's a kind of a, I think, loophole which provides opportunity for people to spend more than the spending limit. The second important focus, and by the way, each candidate has to open a separate bank account through which only through that account the candidate can spend or receive donations. And each candidate after the election, within 30 days of the election, has to spend the details of the election expenses to the Election Commission. And foreign funding to the candidates are not allowed. Foreign funding is defined very elaborately in our laws, whether you receive money from a foreign individual or you receive from a foreign corporate entity or from a foreign government, it is not allowed to be received by a candidate for any political office. The second area of focus for our political finance system is the legislators. And here legislators, members of the Provincial Assembly, or National Assembly, or Senate, they have to submit every year a statement of assets and liabilities, which is again a very elaborate document, and it not only gives assets of the legislator himself or herself, but spouse and the dependents and the children, immediate family, whatever assets and liabilities they have to be put together in that document. And this has to be declared every year by the Election Commission. And Election Commission declares it through a government notification. And if the legislators do not submit this statement in time, then the Election Commission can suspend, and it does suspend, the membership of these legislators. Third element of our political finance system is political parties. And again, a very elaborate system of political finance has been put in place. Each political party has to submit its annual statement of its audited accounts to the Election Commission. And that statement of accounts carries the income, sources of income, the donations which it has received, and the list of the donors, and the spending which it has incurred, and the assets which the political party has accumulated. So foreign funding to political parties is not allowed, not in any form, and it's again very in detail elaborated in the election laws. You cannot receive even a single dollar from a foreign source. But Pakistanis who are living abroad, whom we call overseas Pakistanis, they are not considered a foreign source of funding. If that person has Pakistani nationality, has a Pakistani identification card, that person, even if that person is living abroad, has a dual nationality, can still fund political parties. And there's no upper limit on donations to political parties. And political parties do not have any election spending limit. Unlike individual candidates, political parties can spend any amount. And corporate funding is allowed in election law, but corporate laws, the Company Act, does not allow funding to political parties. So there's a kind of contradiction in our laws which needs to be resolved. Lastly, I would like to just very quickly mention some important reforms which we think are needed in political reform system of Pakistan. As you might have noticed, we have a very robust and quite detailed legal framework of political finance system in Pakistan. But unfortunately, the system of enforcement of these laws is not as robust. So therefore, I think the system of enforcement needs to be improved and improved drastically. And first point in that is that the Election Commission of Pakistan, which is the entity responsible for monitoring political finance, for enforcement of political finance laws, Political Election Commission must enhance its capacity, especially that capacity which deals with political finance. It must have financial professionals, it must have auditors, it must have accountants, chartered accountants, and it have sufficient number of people who can at least a small portion of these statements which are submitted every year should be able to scrutinize. So I think first important point is that Election Commission, which has a very, I think, weak capacity at the moment, it must improve its capacity by enhancing its human resource, and not only in terms of quantity, but in terms of quality also. Uh, Another important thing is that uh, like we have the spending limit of candidates, I think political parties' spending limit should also be fixed. Political parties now are, every year we are seeing that they're spending much more money than they used to spend in the past. And most of this money is spent on the electronic media. Individual candidates do not spend so much money on electronic media. So if you give a carte blanche to political parties to spend as much as they can or as much they want, that will probably defeat the purpose of political finance checks and balances. So I think there must be a cap on the spending of political parties. And legislators, statements which they submit every year, although Government of Pakistan Election Commission issues that in the form of uh, a government circular, but I think it doesn't reach people. The spirit of the declarations is that people, it should be very transparent. Anyone should be able to see it, should be easily access that. So I think Election Commission should put this document on their website so that everybody can reach it. And lastly, I think we should find some way, when we are putting so many restrictions on political parties and on their finance and campaign funding, I think we should give some serious thought about legitimate funding of political parties. And I think we should look at the possibility of public funding of political parties so that political parties are not dependent on vested interest for their funds. And I think that's an area which we can see, look at the example of Germany, for example, which has probably a very elaborate public funding system. And I think developing countries like ours should look into the possibility of public funding. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mehboob. Mr. Mehboob was presenting the case of Pakistan, and he mainly said that we have a very robust law or a legal framework for political finance, which is there in the country, but how effectively it is managed is where we need more and more support, and that political parties must also have some kind of a limit according to which they can spend money, and also that Pakistan should consider a system of public funding of political parties as well. With that, I'll now move to Indonesia, and I'd like to invite Shri Nurynati, who I already introduced, researcher at Center for Political Studies at the Indonesian Institute of Sciences. She just also told us that she's served as the election commissioner of Indonesia as well. Over to you, Shri Nurynati.
Good afternoon to everyone. I would like to thanks AIE and also ADRN for hosting this webinar. I am very thankful, and I'm from the Indonesian Institute of Sciences. Today, I would like to talk about the system and governance of the political party finance in Indonesia. Hang on. So to be the political party, actually in Indonesia, the law stipulated that the political party should have the legal entity. So they have to show that they have a legal status and should be registered at the Ministry of Law and Human Rights. They supposed to have branches of the committees. They have to have memberships, offices, and also they have to set up an account number. So this account number is specifically under the name of political party. So not on behalf of political party. This account number cannot be in the name of someone or the leader of political party. So it should be under name of the political party. And they have also to show the first deposit. So there are three main research concerns of this study. First is on provisions of the regulation. Second will be on supervisions and reporting. The third will be on evaluations and proposal for reform. On provisions of the regulations on financial sources, actually all political party can have three sources of political party finance. First, they could come from internal sources of political party finance. Secondly, they also can have the external sources of political party finance. And the third one, they could also get the government assistance of the political party finance. On the governance of the political party finance, in our law regulates that the organizations and and office operation need should be spirited from campaign finance, and reports of the campaign finance especially scrutinized by public accountant. On internal sources of political party finance, it can be in the form of money coming from the membership fee, and it could be in kind of goods, any kind of goods that can be converted into amounts of money, and also in terms of services include airtime, advertisement, etc. The external sources of finance, it could be in the form of donation. In this case, the individual and business entity donation stipulated at verses number 35 of the law number 2, 2011 on political party finance stipulated that political party may obtain donation from the following categories. First, they could come from individual members of a political party where the membership is regulated in the political party manifesto. Second, it coming from the individual who are not members of a political party, but it has limitation at most 1 billion rupiah, or roughly equal to 70,9.19 as per 22nd February, where the report is made. Per person within 1 year budget. And then if coming from companies or business entities, they have limitation that the political party can have at most 7,500,000,000 rupiah, or roughly equal to 531,000.9 as per 22nd February conversion rate per company or per business entity within 1 year fiscal. There are also three interconnected regulation to make better accountability of the political party finance. Therefore, in Indonesia, we do have at least two laws and one government regulation. Law number 2, 2017 on election is also regulates that all political party should establish their own account for political party finance. Law number 2, 2011 on political party also similarly regulates the same thing. And government regulation number 1, 2018 on managing political party finance actually stipulated that all political party finance governance should be managed through mechanism that shows the accountability and responsiveness of the use of the money. There are at least problems that we face in Indonesia in terms of funding sources, that political party is hard to collect membership fee because of membership fee is something that have to be paid by each person who is the member of the political party. But political party complained that they could not collect the membership fee from their members. Other sources of political party ATMs can be found by asking the legislators who are in power or elites of the political party who are in power to give some amount of money to political party. This is something that should also comply with the regulation. But there is also a tendency where it also due to the organizing the political parties needs a lot of money. Therefore, they have entrepreneur ties that happening in organizing the political party. And because of that tendency, it's also becoming that political party sometimes showing that it is more personalistic based. In terms of access towards the report of the political party finance, sometimes people or public have uneasy access towards it unless you have to contact and to contact some person or you contact election commission office. And in terms of this, we do have money disclosure, but to some of the democratic, democratic intellectuals, activists, they say it as more in a formal way rather than in showing the real money that or the real financial that operated by political party. So in the regulation, we also have the supervisions and reporting. In supervision, it in terms of the using of political party finance, it should be 60% allocated for political education and 40% should be allocated for operational activities. In reporting, it should be separated between organizational operational needs on an office supply and should be separated from campaign finance. Therefore, we can see that how much money allocated for organization operational activities and how much money that used for campaign finance. On political education as in the law article number 1234 of law number 2, 2011 is referred to deepening the value of the 4 pillars of the nation and state, which are Pancasila, 5 pillars. The Constitution year 1945, Bhinneka Tunggal Ika or Unity in Diversity principles, and the unitary state of Indonesia. And secondly, political education is also has to understand the rights and obligations of the citizens of Indonesia in developing ethic and political culture. And the third, political education is should be relating with recruitment of the cadre or political party members that done by tied, structured, and the sustainability plan. On government assistance, as I said earlier on, it is based on the law number 2, 2011 and law number 7, 2017. The government assistance should be accounted, and it is based on the number of votes they gain during the election. But again, the government assistance is considered too small. So therefore, later on, I can show you that this is something that rising the reform. On reporting, the operational needs and office supply must be separated from campaign. and on scrutinizing the financial of the political party. If your political party got a government assistance, therefore it will be scrutinized by state financial scrutiny, and campaign finance is scrutinized by public accountant offices. On evaluation and proposal for reform, as I said earlier on, in terms of effectivity of the regulation implementation, it should be enforced by independent body. Otherwise, it will be in more informal way, formalistic way, rather than in a more substantial way. And on government assistance, it needs to be increased. And in terms of usage of the funding, campaign activities should be closely related to political education. Therefore, in campaign activities, though you need to ask people to vote for your political party, but it's supposed to have political education sense and also value in it. So in terms of reporting, it must be spirited and it must be a balance in terms of portions allocated for political education and office need. Therefore, as I said earlier on, it regulates that 60% is for political education and office need only allocated up to 40%. And also it should be balanced in terms of public and private sources. I think that's all that I can share for today. We can have discussion later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shri Nurynati. I'll now go to Mr. Chinen Wu, who's an associate research fellow at the Institute of Political Science at Academia Sinica, Taiwan. Over to you, Chinen Wu, for the system of political finance in Taiwan. Mr. Chinen Wu, if we can start your presentation.
Maybe he needs to unmute himself.
He is unmuted. Can you hear us? We can actually see your screen. We can see your presentation. Or we can't hear you. Yeah, we're unable to hear you.
So can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm sorry. So I'm going to share the file with you again. Okay, so I'm delighted to share my observation about the political finance in Taiwan. And basically, there is a single law, Political Donation Act, that regulates the political finance system in Taiwan. It's passed in 2004. Before that is a chaotic situation. There's no regulation. And in this law, individual and the political party, civil organization, and company can make contribution, but they must go through the designated accounts after being approved by the Control Yuan, which is the ombudsman in Taiwan. And there is a period that people can make contribution for presidential candidate is 1 year before their tenure end, and for legislative yuan it's only 10 months. So it's not a long period in Taiwan, not like in the United States. You can receive donation anytime. And there is a contribution limit, just like in other country, and we have a cap on the amount of money individual and business and civil association can contribute to individual candidate, party, and the political association. And also we have another upper limit on the total amount of donation contributed to individual candidate, different party or political association. So a single company, he can only donate certain amount of money to all the candidate he want to contribute. So to reduce their a single person or single company's influence on politics. And of course, there are some types of enterprise that are not allowed to make donation. The first is public enterprises and the manufacturer that have contract with government, and those business, they are in accumulative deficit, and business operated by political party. Those companies are not allowed to make donation. And also there's a punishment. Most of violations are subject to fine, but only a small fraction of violation will be sentenced to prison, like accepting money from China and receiving money not through a designated account. But the control yuan in Taiwan do not have enough manpower to check, so almost no politician resign because of forced declaration. And also the control yuan has a website, and he need to publish all the political donation, all the information, and so it can easily look at it online. For foreign donation, we have a special regulation on this. So people and judicial person, association, companies in foreign country, People's Republic of China, Hong Kong, and Macau are not allowed to make contribution. And also, although we have upper limit on the contribution, but we have no upper limit on expenditure. So there's no upper limit on the total amount that the candidate, party, or political group can receive. And also there's no limit on the total amount candidate or parties can spend in elections. The unspent contribution can be kept by candidates for 4 years if they can use it for re-election. And if they do not use it, and the remaining need to return to the government. But we mentioned they have there's a limit on how much money people and the company can donate. But in some case, the big corporation, they have multiple subsidiaries. So they will make a contribution by individual subsidiary, and each with different name. So if you look at the name of the company, you saw there are different companies, but actually they belong to the same group. So the big corporation, they will do this, and they usually try to contribute to different party and different candidate to make friends with everybody. So they use this way to donate money. And for incorrect declaration, there is a punishment. If you make false declaration, you will be fined such amount of New Taiwan dollars. If you receive donation without registering a designated account, and you will be put in jail up to 3 years in prison. And the reason, in last year, we passed the Anti-Infiltration Law that will especially aim at preventing the infiltration from mainland China. And we increased the punishment on people from outside Taiwan to make political contribution, campaign contribution. So in this law, anyone who receives money from China to make political contribution will be punished for up to 5 years in prison and the fine up to 10 million New Taiwan dollars. So it increased the punishment for people who receive or help to donate the money to domestic candidate, and their punishment increase. But another thing is that there's always the issue that the people receive money and then they will do something for the people who donate the money, and there's always a possibility of the undue benefits, or the donation become a bribery. So there's a real punishment for Anti-Corruption Act, and but the providing quid pro quo is hard, especially for member of parliament, because member of parliament is always right, has the right to question the official, pass law and budget, but they do not directly enforce the law. So in practice, it's sometimes hard for judge to say that the member of parliament who advocate something to say that they are doing special favor for a particular company. So there are several cases in Taiwan after democratization, and they involve the occupational association donation. The judicial process takes years, and almost all end up not guilty. So there are still cases in last year. There are several legislators involved in a case, but they are still under judicial review, still in the legal process. Also, there's a problem because today we are talking about the campaign finance law. Actually is related to several other laws that should be strengthened to make the campaign finance really working. The one is the lobbying law. The lobby law in Taiwan is not very robust, and so many people who lobby the government do not register. So far from its passed to until now, there are only like 400 something lobby in Taiwan. So there's most of people who make who contact the legislator to ask for something, they just don't register, and so but nobody knows. And the government do not issue any fine on those people who lobby but do not register. And last slide, this is the last slide I want to mention is there's still an issue of KMT party asset. KMT is the old authoritarian regime, authoritarian party, and he still survives as one of the main party now. But KMT in the past, they have huge party asset. So they gave So it make the playing field not level, and the county can donate in each election, donate a lot of money, or gave a lot of money to its own candidate, and even he do not it receive fewer donation from the general public, but overall he can spend more than its political components because of its party assets. And after the party turnover in 2016, almost all counties' assets are frozen because the DPP believe they are not legal, and because the counties get those assets in not a legal way, and but the lawsuits are still going on. So we have to wait and to see the result. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chin and Wu, who was presenting the case of the system of political finance in Taiwan, how effectively it is utilized, and how effective the legal system, in fact, is. I'd now like to move to our speaker from Malaysia, who will discuss with us the case of what kind of system of political finance exists in Malaysia, how is it different from other countries? Ms. Aira Azhari, who is managing IDEA's Democracy and Governance Unit. Over to you, Ms. Azhari.
Thank you, Aasiya, and also to EAI for hosting this webinar today. I don't have slides, but I will share with you the draft paper that my colleague and I have authored. And I will share some points from there. So let's see. Okay, I think you all can see my screen. So the Malaysia case for political financing, I think probably is slightly different from some of our other neighbors and also some other countries in the world, mainly because Malaysia does not have a legislation that regulates political funding. And the only legislation that exists in Malaysia that has to do with money and politics is limits on how much a candidate can spend at the state and also at the federal level during a campaign. But there is nothing regulating where political parties can get money from, or how they can or cannot spend it. So that's the situation in Malaysia. So I chose to look at 4 points, which are the 4 bullet points on the screen here, which is the nexus between business and politics in Malaysia, particularly through government-linked companies, the role of elected representatives within our democratic system, the current political financing ecosystem and its consequences, and also I will look at some recommendations to improve the current system that we have. So the nexus between business and politics in Malaysia is, I don't think Malaysia is alone in having inextricable links between business and politics. In Malaysia, there is a long history of political involvement and also interference in business. When the party that ruled Malaysia for 60 years until 2018, which is the United Malay National Organization, which is UMNO, has a vast network of businesses and also companies that it controls. And Malaysia also has Malaysia also has this thing called government-linked companies, where these companies are meant to actually serve important social objectives and should be run independently, transparently, and with accountability. But many of these companies have been used or co-opted by political parties for their own financing. And also there have been cases of corruption that has happened previously. And what has happened in the last few years is there have been appointments of politicians and also politically linked persons into the boards and also the management of GLCs, which have greatly compromised their independence. And political appointments have also been used as a means to reward party members who won in elections. So this political interference has caused monetization of politics, and corporations and businesses who support the ruling party gain easier access to government grants and contracts. So I will elaborate some more on some of the recommendations to try and improve the situation a bit later. Secondly, I would like to highlight the role of elected representatives within Malaysia's democratic system. So in Malaysia, we have parliaments both at the state level and also at the national level. And usually in an election, a Malaysian voter would cast his or her vote for your representative in the state assembly and also representative in the national assembly, and similar to many other countries. And I highlight this point of the role of elected reps mainly because many politicians in Malaysia feel that they need to raise a lot of money and also have a lot of huge amounts of cash with them because it is expected by their voters in their constituents. So, for example, if you want to remain electorally viable in your constituent, you need to be able to provide cash and also many other kind of in-kind contributions to your constituents. And this exacerbates the problem of political financing because many politicians feel pressured to raise huge amounts of money because of this clientelist relationship between voter and also elected representative. So, and there are several reasons for this. Firstly, I think the state welfare system in Malaysia has broken down to some extent, and many Malaysians cannot rely on the state anymore to provide welfare and also basic goods. So that duty gets transferred to their member of parliament or their state assemblyman, which actually is not their role. They're supposed to be policy makers who enact laws and debate policies in parliament, right? So that is one reason. Another reason is I think Malaysian society is still largely quite feudalistic, and many Malaysians still look to their elected representatives to solve problems, to provide aid when they are in trouble. So this coupled with a lack of legislation means that a lot of MPs and a lot of state assembly persons try to gain money from questionable sources to cater to some of these needs. So and so there is very little accountability and also transparency in the entire system. And I'll elaborate a bit now on the current political financing ecosystem and its consequences. So I chose to highlight 6 key issues with the current system in Malaysia: monetization of politics, unequal access to funds, factionalism, covert funds, inadequate law enforcement, and also weak institutions. So I think many of you here might be familiar with our former Prime Minister, Najib Razak, who, and the 1MDB scandal that broke in 2016, if I'm not mistaken, and actually led to his downfall in the 2018 elections. And this scandal is a perfect example of how political financing in Malaysia has become a very corrupt system, because the 2.6 billion that was found in his personal bank account allegedly came from a prince in Saudi Arabia, which was used for the 2018 elections. So that's just one example of how the system has been abused. And just now I mentioned that there is a law that regulates political campaign spending. So that's in the Election Offences Act of 1954. 200,000 ringgit in the case of an election to the federal parliament, 100,000 ringgit to the state legislative assembly, 10,000 ringgit for local authority, and 3,000 for local council. And many argue that these limits are actually quite unrealistic because no one actually spends only 200,000 ringgit for a national level election. So some of the reforms proposed, has said that this amount actually needs to be raised. And putting such low caps actually doesn't solve the problem. It means that money will just go underground, and people are actually just going to spend a lot more and not declare it. So some of the reforms actually mention that this needs to be changed. There is also an imbalance of funding for political parties because the just because of the nature of political parties in Malaysia, where there are huge parties that dominate business networks, and then there are smaller parties that do not have access to it. So there is a problem of inequality in accessing funds as well, which is why an act is important, so that there can be a more level playing field. So some of the recommendations that I have put here is to have a political financing act firstly. So we should start from there because Malaysia doesn't even have any legislation at the moment. So what goes into the act is something that academics and civil society have been talking about for the last few years. So for example, there should be a requirement for party accounts to be audited and financial report to be made available to the public. There should be clear punishment mechanisms, and also limits on funding, and also a ban on foreign funding, as I think some of our other panelists have mentioned. Secondly, introduction of vote-based and seat-based direct public funding. So I think some of our other panelists also mentioned a public funding model, which can increase transparency and also promote good governance within political parties. So there are several mechanisms in which public funding can be done. So there's also direct and indirect. So indirect, for example, is where the state provides funding for the parties to conduct policy research, for example. And direct public funding is where it's for general election campaigns and such. I will just go straight to the third one. So the third one is indirect public funding, as I mentioned, for policy research and other purposes. So so this is just some of the issues that I've picked up from the Malaysia case. The situation is not ideal at the moment. There is a draft bill that has actually been written for political financing, but it's currently still with the cabinet, and there seems to be no political will to actually table it in parliament. So I would say that's the main duty of civil society in Malaysia at the moment right now, is to get this law tabled. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This was a very useful account of where Malaysia is at. Thank you also for identifying some of the reforms that you think Malaysia needs. And you rightly pointed out some of these things are what other Asian democracies also feel they should have. I don't really have questions from attendees or sort of list of online questions. So maybe I'll go back to the panel one by one and ask them if they have questions or comments from each other. And I'd go in the same order, in the order in which I invited everyone to speak. So Mr. Mehboob, if I can go to you first, and if you have any questions or comments for any of the other panelists, and then we can, we can go to others.
Thank you, Aasiya. Yes, I have some questions. Especially, I found the Indonesian presentation very fascinating. At least this aspect of political parties required to spend 60% of its funds on political education. I think it's a very, if I understood it correctly, that they are required to spend 40% on their operational activities and 60% on political education. So I would like to know if this is correct, if I understood it correctly. Secondly, what are they doing for this political education? Is there a curriculum for political education? Are there political academies like Germans have affiliated to political parties? How is it done? Because 60% is a lot of money, a lot of percentage, I must say. If it is part of the law, and if she has the English translation of the law, I would request her to send her a copy, because that is something we would like to really follow in our country, because we really need political education, but sadly we do not have any such provision in the law. Okay, then you had also mentioned that there's a government assistance to political parties based on the votes secured by a political party. But you also mentioned that it's a very small amount. So what is the formula for such a government assistance, and why you think it is a small amount, and what you would like to improve it, how you would like to improve it? So this is my question from Indonesia. If there's a more chance to ask questions in the next round, I may have questions for others, but primarily I have this question from my Indonesian colleague.
Thank you, Shri. If I can invite you to answer that, and also if you have any other questions.
Okay, thank you, Ahmed, Bilal, Mehboob, sir. So in Indonesia, yes, you are correct that the regulation stipulated that 60% of financial of the political party should be spent for political education. Therefore, it is include how political party can recruit the best members for their list to be the candidate to fill up the candidacy for legislature, and also to fill up the candidacy for political public elites. Therefore, the political education is in the form of having regulation, having regular training, having a regular curriculum that applies for their training, in-house training. So in this curriculum, actually, they have to deepen the 5 pillars, the value of 5 pillars, and also to deepen the knowledge on how political parties should work. And then other than that, it's also include to fund the activities for campaign in terms of not campaign, but socialization process for their political ideology. So, like for example, one political party, they have to set up the meetings, the national meeting, and in the national meeting, they have to spare some time for making their ideology to be understood well by their all of members. And in terms of reforms, these days, all of political party who has who can place their members in MPs, they have and they are entitled to get the financial assistance from government. And this time the value is very small, as I said earlier on, because of it is only 1,000 per vote. 1,000 per vote is equal to 0.014, I guess, 0.014 dollars, US dollars. And then according to our study, me and also my friend in the Center for Political Studies, we actually, we conducted a study. We conducting a research together with the Commission for Anti-Corruption for eradicating corruption, and then we formulate to that the government can increase their government assistance to up to 10,000, up to 0.14 per foot. Therefore, political party is very happy if the government could increase their assistance, but in having the assistance increased, then the political parties should obey some rules. For example, they have to have a good and structural recruitment process for their memberships. They have to have a regular training implemented in their institution. And we also propose that they have to obey the political party ethic. Maybe I forget to mention that we already conduct the research, and one of the research that we have is we are formulating the political party ethic. In this case, we are trying to help political party to have a better recruitment process and better socialization process. Therefore, this is what we mean by political education. So not in terms of, only casting the ballot, but in terms of deepening the value of becoming political party. Unfortunately, we do not have the political party law translated into English, but later on, if I could find one, I will share with you with Aasiya and also with Tues. So that's for my response for Mehboob sir. And then can I ask one question?
Yes,
for
yes, please. I have just one question from a panelist from one of the participants also.
Okay.
So we have about 23 minutes to conclude.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Chinan mentions about the role of ombudsman. Will you mention more on how ombudsman can be involved in scrutinizing or in overseeing the political party finance in your country? And to Aira, I also have one question, Aira, because you mentioned that up to nowadays the role of NGO for overseeing the political party finance in your country is weak. Well, is there any regulation that entitle for political party to give report, to have a money disclosure of all activities?
Thank you. If I can also add to this, and I'll first come to Chin and Wu to answer that. Mr. Niranjan Sahu also asked a relevant question. If you can also talk when you're answering the question, Chin and Wu, how weak or how strong is the election commission or election management body in Taiwan? How independent is it? If you can talk about that, because his question really is, and I'll go to Aira a bit later also, that why is it taken so long, especially for Malaysia and Pakistan, to have a political finance law, but also why is sort of this implementation so weak? Is it because the election commissions are weak, or is there some other reason for that? So first Chin and Wu, and then Aira, and I'll then go to Mr. Mehboob to answer the question about Pakistan at the end.
Okay. Thank you for the question. For the ombudsman's part, because Taiwan's political structure we do not only have 3 power, we have 5 power government. So, and we have executive, legislature, judicial, and we also have a control yuan, and there's another one. But the control yuan is actually is responsible for investigate the misconduct of the government. So the campaign finance law was the account was regulated by the control yuan, and the control yuan has the power. If they think there's a big policy mistake, they can control yuan's the investigator can investigate the issue. But for the registration or to investigate individual candidates' report, whether it's correct or not, I think we still have room to improve, because it's not a very big organization. I don't think they have the power to do a very good job. And we do have a election commission, but it's responsible for the running of the election. So for deciding the day, the location, or polling station, something like that. And it does not involve in the campaign finance law. I think it's good because we separate the power from, because let me say that because the election commission was under the executive branch, is one of the department. So even is nominated by different party, but it still can be subject to political influence. But now we put that power in another independent and the parallel government organization. I think they can better perform their function. I have a question for, can I have a question for Aira?
Yes, please. I think that then Aira can answer all of them in one go.
Yeah, I have. Do you, you mentioned you do not have restriction on foreign donation. Is that right? Even if someone donates from China? Thank you.
Over to you, Aira. You have a few questions now.
Okay. Hi, thanks for the questions. So I'll answer Chilen's question first. So because we don't have a legislation yet that regulates political funding, so there is currently no restriction actually for anyone to donate to political parties, including foreign entities, including China. So I think what has happened with our former Prime Minister Najib Razak has actually shown how important it is for us to have this restriction, because he has claimed that the money that came into his own personal bank account was from a foreign entity, which is from Saudi Arabia, and he claimed that the money is actually for electoral purposes. And under the current law, I mean, he can be charged with money laundering, but it is not against political funding rules. So he has indeed been charged with money laundering, fraud, and various other charges, but not for political funding purposes, because there is currently no law on that. Secondly, on question from Nurynati about whether there is an obligation for political parties to disclose their activities and their accounts. So political parties in Malaysia are registered under the Registrar of Societies, ROS. And this is also not ideal. One of the proposals by civil society is actually to change this registration system for political parties, because the Registrar of Societies also handles registration of all sorts of associations in Malaysia. So For example, if you are an association of basketball players in a certain neighborhood, you are also registered under the same body, which is the Registrar of Societies. So this makes it very difficult for the ROS to monitor the governance and also accounts of political parties, because naturally political parties are quite different entities than just regular societies. So one of the proposals is actually to actually separate the registration of political parties to another independent body. So that would improve the accountability and transparency of political parties. So on the obligation to disclose, there is currently no obligation to disclose to the public. The only obligation political parties have is to disclose to the Registrar of Societies, which is actually a government entity, essentially, right? So what they have to do is to publish their audited accounts and do all their annual general meetings, and declare it to the ROS, but not to the public. So that is another reason why the system needs to be reformed, so that the public gets more transparency and accountability and know exactly where political parties get their money from. I'll just take the other question as well on the independence of election commission on the electoral management body. So in Malaysia, this has also been a problem in the past, where because we had one party ruling for 60 years, so the election commission has also compromised its independence, and in Malaysia, we have the constitution says that the election commission can redraw electoral boundaries only within a certain number of years. So I think it's like 5 or 6 years where they can redraw electoral boundaries. So the election commission has had a history of redrawing electoral boundaries to suit the then incumbent political party. So this has happened, and there has been calls from civil society to improve the independence of the election commission, and also to make the appointment of election commissioners more transparent and more merit-based than it is now. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mehboob, one of the people who've joined us, Mr. Niranjan Sahu, who's also, him and his organization are also part of ADRN. And his question is that, why has it taken so long to have some concrete movements on political finance law? And whether there's, is it because it's a weak law, or is it weak regulatory mechanism? And he's also asked a question about the independence of election commission in Pakistan. Now, I completely understand that even though Aira has answered that question partly, and so has Chin and Wu, this is a different subject altogether. In Pakistan, perhaps not like other countries, maybe in Indonesia, this comes under, our political finance laws are really under the authority of the Election Commission, but largely the question of the independence of Election Commission is perhaps requires another detailed conversation around Asian democracies on how these bodies are functioning, how effective they are, how independent they are. But over to you if you can briefly answer, Bilal sir.
Yeah, thank you for the question, but I think this is a misunderstanding that Pakistan has taken a long time in passing the political finance laws. Actually, this Election Act 2017 might be creating the misunderstanding. We had laws before since a long time, but in 2017, we decided to consolidate them into one Elections Act. We had a separate law on political parties, a separate law on the on various other aspects of the political finance, dealing with the elections itself. So therefore, it is not a correct assessment that Pakistan had a delayed laws. I think it was only put together in a one volume of laws which happened in 2017. And secondly, to answer your question, yeah, Election Commission of Pakistan is a very independent entity. And before that, to answer your question, I still insist that we have some very effective, robust laws on, we can have better, but we have some robust laws on political finance. Major problem in our country is their enforcement. It is not the law itself which is weak, it is the enforcement which is weak. And that's why we think the Election Commission as an institution need to increase its capacity. It has enhanced its capacity in a big way in terms of other aspects of the elections. But political finance is an area which has been left, I think, out, and they need to work on that. And Election Commission is a very independent entity. We have the good fortune of having election commissioners appointed through bipartisan consultation and then endorsed by the parliamentary committee. So that is a very, I think, improved law. But again, we have some very peculiar issues relating to elections, which might sometime drown out the independence of Election Commission. But as Aasiya said, that's a subject totally different and a very vast one. So we can discuss it at some other time.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Mr. Mehboob. You're absolutely right. This is only one aspect of this issue of political finance that we're discussing, but how well our electoral bodies or electoral management systems work, as do our other systems of democratic governance from time to time. Under ADRN, new subjects, new issues, and new comparative studies are actually taken out. Even though we have a bit of time, I understand that all the questions that the panel had asked and all the questions that we received from the audience are answered. This has been certainly a very useful and a very interesting conversation for me personally. And I'm sure I can say that on behalf of all the panelists, that this has been very useful to discuss what kind of a system of political finance each one of these four countries have, how does it differ from each other, where reforms are required, and I think that each country has prepared papers. ADRN will soon be publishing those papers as well, so that more detailed analysis is available to audiences and to the members of the Asia Democracy and Research Network. Before I sign off and I thank each and every panelist individually, I would want to remind the audience that at the end of this webinar, there'll be a pop-up survey, and we'd request that you can give your opinion on the survey and some of the other questions that EI will actually be putting out. Let me, with that, thank you very much, Ms. Aira Azhari from Malaysia. This was very useful to listen to the stage that Malaysia is at and some of the very important questions and concerns and reform areas that you have highlighted, that I think many of us can actually relate to in our countries. Thank you very much, Yin Wu, for sharing the case of Taiwan, where the system is at, the role that ombudsman plays, the role of course, electoral management body, something that we need to discuss on a separate area. The very interesting that you have quite a clear sort of stance. The country has quite a clear legal stance on foreign funding, much like in Pakistan. And thank you very much, Shri Nurynati, for this very wonderful analysis of where Indonesian system of political finances and the various systems or the various reform areas that that Indonesia would like to, or the civil society in Indonesia and citizens would like to bring in. Thank you very much, Mr. Mehboob, for sharing the case of Pakistan and also highlighting that this is not something that we've only just embarked upon in 2017. We've had these laws and these things were followed, but it is in a quest to further improve how well these are effectively operationalized and implemented that Pakistan joins the struggle in having more and more a transparent sort of system and a more effective system of political finance. With that, I thank you very much on behalf of ADRN and on behalf of EI. This would be a goodbye from my side. Thank you very much.